Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. This is the weekly Tottenham news review with me, Lee The Dorset Spur. I'm here to kind of talk about the different things that have been happening over the last week, give an opinion and see what you think about what I've got to say about it. I guess this week is pretty much dominated by the poor performances that we've seen. I guess that's the real stories that are burning through people's minds at the moment. Of course, Villa really disappointing there because it didn't feel like it was a game that we were gonna lose or deserve to lose. But then it also felt like a game that Villa didn't deserve to lose or deserve to win. So that was a really difficult one, a really disappointing result. Scored out of nothing, taking pot shots. I thought, according to Thomas Frank, there was only 8 shots, and they managed to score out of 2 of them. So really disappointing. And out of that one became a lot of debate around Vicario and his ability and whether he was the right man or whether Kinski should be brought in and given and Vicario given a rest because there was concerns about his positioning and so on. Personally, I didn't think that. I didn't think that his positioning was part of the problem. I just felt that we didn't close down quick enough. That we didn't have the intensity that we really needed to. And they can take an opportunity from outside the box. And when you take an opportunity like that, they always look like a very, very good goal. And I'm not sure that Vicario could have got anywhere near either of them. So I didn't really want to blame him for it. But what I did feel that the team was lacklustre and missing an identity of where to go. So then we kind of move on to Monaco, and that's mainly an extension of what I'm saying about the Villa game. It was a very, very flat game. Initially, I was surprised at the team selection. I couldn't understand why Archie Gray was at left back, although he did okay. No, let's not criticise and crucify the guy. I thought he had a good game there. I thought he did okay and everything, but that's not his position. His position is in midfield, and you really want to see him perform in that sort of space to see what he's actually about. Because all the while he's getting used as a utility player, he's not really having the impact that he would want to have, I'm sure, and we as fans would want to see from him. So yeah, bit disappointed with that as well. Again, there was no Xavi to start, and it felt very much like we were playing for a draw. Like I've said in the short video that I've done for Chris, it's not the worst result in terms of the Champions League because we're picking up a point, we're unbeaten, we didn't concede a goal. But the manner of that is a real concern. The fact that they had 20 odd shots and Vicario was our man of the match, redeeming himself from Villa. So for having such a poor game against Villa, allegedly, to going in and to be man of the match was quite a thing. And pleasing for him, I guess, because he must feel that concern. And now he's like, okay, I've had a really good game, got man of the match, saved the team, got us the point, because without him we could have been 5 or 6 down, to be honest. So that was a bit of a worry from that point of view. The fact that Thomas Frank doesn't seem to be seeing it as an issue now, whether he's just playing it up positively because that's what you do. You keep your negative stuff in-house and you talk to your team about how you can improve and so on, rather than calling everybody out and slagging them off on national television. Maybe that's the case. He does seem like a genuinely nice guy, Thomas Frank, but he is starting to say a lot of the same things now, and I think that's not really filling the fans with positivity. that he is the right man. There's already been rumblings already. We're 13 games in, and there's already been rumblings about whether he is the right man to take Tottenham forward. Are we going back to Nuno days? Is this the same sort of football as we had under Mourinho and Conte? So there's all those debates going on, and of course, those that shout loudest get heard the most. Those with the big channels or the big social media accounts are obviously going to have an influence over what people are reading and what they're seeing. But I've seen it in lots of WhatsApp groups as well, a lot of negativity creeping in and so on. And we are, as fans, very, very impatient. We want everything to click now. I mean, if you look at them down the road, they're 6 years in with their manager, still haven't won anything meaningful, and are still building. And this is probably their biggest season. They really got to win something this season for the investment that they've put into it and the loyalty that they've shown to the manager. And yet here we are 13 games in, and there are people genuinely calling for the manager to be sacked, which is quite crazy. Now, I'm not saying that I'm 100% sure that Frank is the man, but what I am sure about is that the constant change of manager doesn't really help. You've got to build somewhere, you've got to have a platform to work from, a philosophy and a style and all the rest of it. Now, the style that we've got now may not be suited to us. It may not be the Tottenham way, which I've seen quoted, but what is the Tottenham way? Is the Tottenham way to win, because that's what we want ultimately. And we are prepared to accept a level of lackluster performances if you get the result. And generally speaking, we have, let's be honest, we have 2 defeats now. So you have to kind of put it all into perspective, but the fans want to be entertained as well. But there's a fine line, as we've seen last season or the season before with Ange. There's a fine line between entertainment and suicide and kamikaze. And whilst some of those games have been exciting because it's been backwards and forwards and last-ditch attempts and all the rest of it, if you lose the game, that's not entertaining. You could be entertained through that kind of high-pressure football, but if that high pressure gives and you lose, you're not entertained then, are you? You're fed up, you've lost the plot, and you got the ump and you want them to actually defend deeper or whatever. So it's getting that balance, and I'm sure that Frank is working on that. He needs to kind of get that in place somewhere along the line. And I think, every good team has to start with their defensive format, making sure that they're hard to beat and so on. And I think that's where you go. If you go into any business where it's failing, the first thing you do is you fix the immediate, to take the pressure off, and then you build from there. And that is, what I think Thomas Frank is trying to do. He has multiple different ways of playing. He has multiple different options and so on. On top of that, the players are not necessarily clicking to how he wants. Xavi has been rather disappointing. I have to say it. I think people are seeing that. Odegaard still not hitting top form, under a lot of pressure, even for a young man. Richarlison's turned back to the Richarlison that we've seen since he's been at Tottenham after a fine start. And of course, Kolo Muani being out injured, along with Takai, who's obviously been out injured. So, the early sort of little roots coming have kind of been cut down a little bit and need to grow. So there is some work to do there. And of course, we cannot ignore the impact of injuries. Now, we already knew that Kulu was out and he was going to be out for a while. We already knew that Dragushin was out and he was going to be out for a while. So we knew those options weren't available to us. But what we didn't know was that when we bought Kota Takai that he would have plantar fasciitis, and that keeps him out. We didn't know that Kolo Muani was going to get a dead leg, and that was going to keep him out. We certainly didn't know about Solanke and his ankle issue. And of course, we didn't know about the ACL issue for Maddison. So they are big impacts upon us for sure. Of course, on top of that, we've lost Son, who, to be fair, hadn't been massively performing, but he did pop up with the odd goal here and there and help us out. So, you can't dismiss his contribution, I guess. So as it stands now, even in terms of the injuries, just watched Thomas Frank's presser, and it feels like it's all very, very unclear. He's trying to be clear. He's trying to give us an idea about what's going on, but all it does is it adds even more uncertainty. So statements like Romero has been on the grass, moving around and stuff, but it's not expected to be a long time. What does that mean? The same with who was the other one he quoted? I can't think off the top of my head who it was now who he quoted, who'd been injured. But he talked about Solanke being on the grass, on his own, but on grass. So still no kind of idea about what's happening there. So, a couple of key players for us that we would really, really like to see back, to give us that, that opportunity to really, get, some level of support into this squad, because I feel like we are going to head down the same road of having to play players out of position to be able to fill the squad, and that's not where we want to be. So yeah, it's a little bit disappointing. Like I say, I've got to be honest, I always enjoyed Ange's pressers because he was always quite fiery and quite clear. He always had a little pearl of wisdom, certainly in the early days, a little pearl of wisdom to put out there. He showed a lot of empathy for his players and for the fans and so on, defended the club staunchly. Frank, I find a little bit more predictable in what he's going to say. And to be fair, just to clarify, with Ange towards the end, I felt that he was being clickbaited by the journos. They just really wanted to get him going so that they had something to print. And he fell into that trap time again because it was just relentless, the same stupid question time after time. But with Frank, I find him rather predictable in what he's going to say. Like I say, there's not a lot of substance in what he's talking about. It doesn't feel like it, that he's got, he's giving you any kind of real clear information. The injured players are injured and they're coming back. But your doggy, that was the other one. Sorry, Destiny. Again, he just said, yeah, he's out on the grass, blah blah blah. He's done some training and that. But what does that really mean? Does that mean, he's on the grass, but he can't tackle, he can't play, he can't run? Does it mean he's doing really, really well and yeah, he should be back? So, it's just really unclear. And I think when you're talking like that, and if you take the example of Solanke, that kind of gives you the idea that actually these little injuries, these little niggles that we're seeing are actually turning into, some quite long time out. And we've got some big games coming up. We're really going to need some of these players back. Everton this weekend is not going to be easy. They're fairly resurgent. Jack Grealish has found his form again. They've got their new stadium. There's a real buzz about the place. Moyes seems to be a perfect fit for them, and it seems to be going well. So, that's going to be a difficult game. And then, of course, you've got the likes of Chelsea and Man United and Arsenal and all these, PSG, and, there's a fair few big games to get your teeth into. Newcastle as well, in the Carabao Cup. Again, not going to be easy. They're on fire at the moment after a slow start. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot to think about and a lot for Frank to get his teeth into. And I guess that's probably why he needs to rotate. He needs to kind of move the players around. He was asked about Pape Sarr, why he's not playing. And it started off with, well, we took him off as a precaution and basically some other players have got ahead of him because of their performances or whatever, and Thomas has felt that they've been better placed to win the game, and that's what he's trying to do. He was asked as well about the Bentancur Palhinha pivot. He seems to be happy with it, but again, he talks about the whole team rather than focusing on on certain players and certain aspects of it, which you would expect him to do, right? If he was starting to throw Bentancur under the bus, saying, yeah, he's not passing it forward fast enough, or, you know, more times than he, not, then you'd be a bit like, oh, really? Is he calling a player out? That's not going to do his confidence a lot of good. So, yeah, it's a real difficult one. It would be great. Wouldn't you just love to be around a training pitch or the club for a week, just to understand the dynamic of how it all works? I know we had it in the All or Nothing program for Amazon, which I was in, by the way. But that really didn't tell us an awful lot, and things have moved on from then. It would be really interesting to see what's going on behind the scenes from our point of view. So yeah, it'd be good to know what's going on in Thomas Frank's mind. But then I guess, he doesn't want to give that out to every other manager out there of how he works and what he does and all that sort of stuff. You open yourself right out, don't you? So yeah, so a difficult week this week, and this probably doesn't feel like a very positive video. I don't mean it to be negative. I'm just talking about how I see it and how I feel about the different things that are going on. There's still other stuff going. We've got new people on the board and stuff like that all coming up and everything else. So, and like I say, last week we were talking about the transparency that they're trying to provide and so on. And the investment and everything else. So there are things going on in the background to try to help things. It's just the performances on the pitch. And I'm just feeding into the negativity that I'm seeing from Tottenham fans. For me, I've got to be honest, I think we have to be careful what we wish for. I think we have to have a level of patience. And I know people were going to go with the old chestnut. We've had 20 years of keeping patient. But until you find the right man to take us forward, you're just going to have to stick with it and see where it takes you, because you don't know whether Frank will be that man, whether he is going to be able to turn it over and it start to click. Maybe not this season. Maybe this is a real leveling season where you need to see where we are. We need to make tough decisions and so on. And we're prepared to make them as fans. We're prepared to say, Richarlison's got to go. We're going to say that, right? I don't think there's a Tottenham fan out there that wouldn't say Richarlison's not up to the job at the moment, and that we really need some strengthening there. But do we know whether Kala Moani is actually going to really come alive? Do we know whether as soon as Solanke's back, he's going to hit the ground running? And actually, this niggle that he's had in his ankle has been playing him up for so long, and that's why he's not been able to perform at the levels we would like him to. I don't know. It's all ifs and buts and maybes. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see where we go from here. But listen, I've rambled on, as I always do. Thank you if you've made it to the end of this video. Thank you so much for sticking with it. Please do consider signing up and subscribing to Chris's channel. He's very, very close to 200,000 subscribers, which would be amazing. So if you could consider doing that, if you're not already subscribed, it's not going to cost you a penny. It doesn't mean anything to you. All it does is it helps the algorithm. Hitting the notification bell, hitting a like is really helpful. Leaving a comment, all that kind of good stuff, all that YouTube admin is all well worth doing. But as I say, thanks very much for watching. Really appreciate you being here. Please do tell me what you think of these stories and these views. I could be totally on my own with what I'm saying here. I'm just representative of me, not necessarily the wider group, so it'd be interesting to know what everybody else is thinking. But anyway, thanks for watching. As always, I'll see you on the next one. Up the Spurs.